I believe we're living in times where a lot of people have actually realized that they are not their ego, right? They have awakened. They've awakened to the fact that who they really are, who you really are, is the awareness behind your ego, the awareness behind your thoughts, behind your emotions. That is who you truly are. But despite that, this world that we have built for ourselves makes it unbelievably difficult to not let the ego be in charge. Or at least that's how we've been conditioned. We've been conditioned in ways that makes it very, very difficult to get out of this grasp of the ego, because we're just being conditioned to be addicted to a plethora of things. And so in this video, I'm going to share with you 5 very foundational practices that will help you get out of the clutches of the ego. And these practices, you'll find that they're actually not adding anything to your life. Like, these are things that you're basically already doing. It's just about how you're doing them. So let's begin right away with the first one, which is fasting. Fasting is one of the best ways to understand that your ego, it has all of these desires, but they're not, like, you don't need to entertain them right away. Your ego's desires, they're based on more and more and more and actually never being truly satisfied. That's your ego. And when you fast, what you realize is that you can literally go without food so much longer, and then you might think, or that your ego might make you think. Because your ego, it might make you think that you need to be eating every 6 hours or however often. And fasting, and I'll split this up into 2 different types of fasting, right? But fasting, essentially, no matter which type it is, it teaches you that your ego's desires, they're not nearly as important as your ego makes it seem. And by the way, I'm saying that even something as like important for survival, such as eating, depending on how you do it, it becomes an egoic thing. I'm not saying that eating in general is purely a desire of the ego, because it's not, right? It's a very primal function for survival. But the way we engage in the habit of eating is often very egoically driven. And you'll notice that, especially when you're eating junk food, right, that you know is not good for you, where you know that you're basically just entertaining your ego. That is, if you have awakened, then you'll know. Before then, you'll be fully identified with the ego. You won't think about these kind of things. They will not be in your awareness. But once you have disidentified with the ego and you realize that you're eating junk food, you'll notice that you just, as soon as you begin eating that junk food, you will just want more and more and more, and you're never going to be satisfied. So let's get back to the point of fasting. You can do, to make it a part of your lifestyle, I really recommend just intermittent fasting, which is eating around like 2 meals a day and eating them in a time window of maybe 8 hours or less, right? So you eat, let's say, from midday, and then your last meal is no later than 8 p.m. So this 8-hour window. And what that teaches you is subconsciously teaches you exactly what I've talked about before, honestly. It just teaches you that you don't need to be eating all the time. And most of the time that you feel the need to eat, it is not actually necessary at all. And it's just out of habit. Really, it's just to fill a certain emptiness. I mean, this is why, very overweight people, they eat and eat and eat, and it happens because they feel a deep, deep emptiness that they've not been able to address. And because they've not been able to address it spiritually, they try to fill this void with food. And, well, it never gets filled, and that's why, of course, they just expand in their physical body. And the other mode of fasting, of course, is like longer fasting at a time. I've only done this once in my life so far. I've only done a 3-day water fast where I just drank water with some sea salt in it and ate nothing. And that was a really transformational experience. It really was. Especially coming out of that fast, like after eating again, it was beautiful. And I don't even want to take too much away from that. Like, I want you to experience that for yourself. I'm not even gonna tell you exactly what's going to happen because ultimately it is likely going to be different for everyone else a little bit. But the main thing that you really notice, or that I noticed on day 2 of that fast, right after that first day of not eating, is exactly this truth that you don't need to be eating all the time. Like, you don't need to be eating. And also, it actually, like, when your ego starves, your true self, it actually eats good. Like, it begins eating good. When your ego is starving, your spirit is feasting. That's a way to look about it, or look at it. So, let's talk about the second practice. And this one is not going to come as a surprise. It's meditation. Meditation is, I would say, the most foundational physical practice that any human being should be engaging in my personal opinion, in my egoic opinion. I think everyone would be doing themselves a favor by meditating, even if it's just like 20 minutes a day, which is not a lot of time. Like, meditation, out of everything I'm telling you here, meditation is actually like the only thing that potentially adds something to your life, right? Because fasting, for example, you're already eating. It's just about how you engage in eating. Meditation, you might not be meditating at this point in time. If you aren't, I highly, highly recommend it. But at the same time, meditation itself, it's not necessarily, it's just a medium. You can get into meditative states through different mediums. For example, like, I don't know, for me personally, when I was in Italy earlier this year, my family, they have a house there in the how do you say, countryside. It's super beautiful there, and I was chopping wood. I was just engaging in this beautifully meditative experience of chopping wood. And so, it's these kind of things where you're just fully engaged, fully present. Just being present is being in a meditative state, and you can be present all the time. Of course, the world makes it quite difficult. The demands that the world has on you can make it very difficult to stay present all the time. And that's why it's so good to have these conscious practices like meditation that you just get into the habit of participating in. And meditation is one of those things where unconscious people, and this is not a judgment, I'm just saying it as a fact, unconscious people who are fully identified with their ego, who have not yet felt that they are actually this awareness behind their ego. They will see, or the notion that they often have is, it's at least what I have found in my life, the notion that unconscious people often have about the purpose of meditation is that they think it's about, relaxation, it's about reducing stress and these kind of things, right? These kind of effects. But that's not really the deeper purpose. The deeper purpose of meditation is simply being. It's simply being, and being that awareness, not labeling things, not, entertaining your thoughts and thinking that you need to be acting on these thoughts. Is just watching, watching in non-reaction, watching without judgment. And over time, that is simply going to, that it's going to disassociate you with your ego. That's the thing. If you meditate consistently, it's going to help you find more and more awareness in your life, and it's going to make you more present. And that's what life is all about. Really, life, it ultimately is all about finding that presence, because the here and now, it's all there is. There is no future. There isn't really any past. Those are all things that your ego relates to, but it's not the truth. The truth is that there is only this present moment, and meditation, it's a practice that helps you realize that and helps you deepen that relationship with the present moment. And I just mentioned the term non-reaction. So another thing, this is the third practice that I highly recommend. It's taking cold showers. Or at least, that's how I do it. I usually shower warm, but then towards the end, I just, like, how do you say? I just shower cold. This is another word that I was trying to use here, but towards the end, I turn the water cold, and I do that for really one main reason, and that is non-reactivity. It's to realize that this cold water, like your body will be like, it will be like freezing up, and it will fight against this cold. But if you do it regularly, you'll realize that this cold, you don't need to react to it. You do not need to react to the cold water. That's a choice of the ego. I mean, there's something instinctual about it, because it's almost like a pain. But even that is something you learn. You don't need to react to every little bit of pain. Because sometimes, that's the thing, sometimes the pain you have in your body, it's an indicator that maybe something is not exactly working as intended. Maybe you're doing something that is straining your physical body, and it's basically telling you to stop. But there's also oftentimes the case where your ego, it can actually produce even physical pain in your body because it wants you to react. Because your ego, it thrives on your suffering, and it thrives on you ascribing meaning to pain. So that's something that these cold showers, they teach you that you don't need to be reacting to every bit of pain, and that you can simply, notice it maybe, but then be unaffected by it. And through that, you'll find that, like, half the suffering that pain actually gives you, it's instantly taken away. Because we artificially create suffering for ourselves by ascribing meaning to every bit of pain. And the extreme of this is something that I personally, or my ego personally, used to suffer from extensively, which is hypochondria. right? It's like interpreting every bit of pain as something catastrophic, as something that is going to end your life. And there's some deeply, deeply rooted fear attached to that, and some deeply, deeply rooted, at least for me personally, I found that one reason why I was suffering from hypochondria was because I felt that I was not seen and that I wanted to be seen. And in some weird way, not even that weird, honestly, but in some way, of course, there was this imagination, this scenario of being really sick, and all of a sudden I would get all the attention, right? Because I was so sick. If you're suffering from hypochondria, like, this might be exactly what is happening to you, right? You do not feel seen, and that's why you imagine this, or like you're sort of imagining this scenario where you're so sick, so you kind of want it. Your ego wants it, not you, but your ego wants to be sick because it wants to feel seen, or it thinks that that's what will make it seen. Bit of a side tangent here, but I guess it just wanted to come through. So let's talk about the fourth practice that you can engage in, and that's going to really help you detach from your ego and understand that you are not your ego. And it's going to help you be present, and that is conscious breathing. Something you can do at any moment. Literally, all it takes is noticing that you're breathing and just focusing on it. You can do it literally at any moment in the day. You might just pop out for a moment, notice that you're breathing, notice that you're alive. And something very crucial here is actually that I had to learn, I think, and that I just realized this morning, really, that I was just able to name like this morning, and that is that when you're doing this, make sure that you do not feel or like realize that you do not need to do anything. Like, breathing happens on its own. You do not need to help your breath. Because last year, I remember I had trouble breathing. Like, last year, it was a very turbulent year, let's say. And I had times where I just felt like I couldn't breathe. I felt like my breath was really shallow. It wasn't really filling me up the way it would feel satisfying, like in a way where it would feel satisfying. And so breathing felt difficult because in a sense, I felt like I had to do something. I felt like I had to force in the air into my lungs to get enough of it. But what actually happened was that oftentimes I would breathe in so deeply, I would force in so much air that it would make the next breath feel even less satisfying and even less nourishing. And not only that, like, sometimes it would genuinely hurt because I would just be pushing in so much air. And of course, that, in a sense, it was all a manifestation of deeply, deeply rooted stress inside me. So what I've realized this morning is really that when, like, there is danger, there's potential for that to be the case, right? For you, where I'm telling you, become conscious of your breathing, and then you're like, your ego is like, okay, I'm becoming conscious now. Let me make sure I'm doing this right. Like, let me make sure I'm breathing incorrectly and all of that stuff. But like, relax, relax. Your infinite intelligence, the infinite intelligence inside of you, that is literally doing everything that is keeping you alive, that is circulating your blood, that is making sure your heart beats how it needs to be beating, that is making sure that your white blood cells, they kill off any pathogens and that kind of stuff. Things that happen in your body that you are not responsible for. Breathing is one of them, right? Because I think breathing, the it's really like the gateway, because breathing, it both at the same time, it happens on its own, and it's guided by the infinite intelligence. It happens while you sleep, while you're not conscious, but you can affect it consciously. Like you can do like this, it's a conscious and somewhat forced decision and action that you can take. So in that sense, it's really like the connecting piece between the spiritual world and the physical world. So really, to get back to the point here, when you consciously notice your breath, really do just that. Don't force the breath to come in any certain way. Just notice it. Notice that it's there. Notice that you can you can notice it, and you can at that point detach from thoughts, from emotions, and just focus on your breath. And lastly, the last practice that I highly recommend you to at least engage in for limited periods of time is celibacy. Celibacy, or specifically for men, semen retention. And now this is a topic, specifically semen retention. I feel like it's a topic that has been it has become a victim of this whole, maxing culture. It's like a maxing, because it's like about getting something out of semen retention. At least that's how it feels in like the cultural way that I've picked it up, and when I heard people talking about it, it's like the power you gain from semen retention. That's not really what it's about, right? What it's really about here is the fact that our desire for reproduction is extremely primal. It's like the most primal and most connected, like physically connected thing to our physical body. It's more physical than eating, right? It's more direct than eating, because it's like an actual part of your body that wants to experience these things. And because of that, when you engage in this practice of celibacy, what you're really doing is you're learning to not not give your ego everything that it wants on the most primal, the most foundational level. And I think that's really powerful. Like, for me personally, I've noticed that everything everything it really starts in my life, like everything it really begins with with that practice of semen retention. It really gives you a different kind of a life force, because you're just practicing to be yourself and not be your ego, and not entertain every little desire of your ego. Now, what I'm all about, though, is ego harmony. And ego harmony means that you do actually have the ability to entertain some of your ego's desires, but you do it in a very, very conscious manner, and you do it only when you feel that your ego's control, it has dissolved completely at least once. Like, you have to have a complete dissolvement or ego death once, because then the ego, it can actually regrow. It can regrow in a healthy way, in a conscious, and by you, and like directed by you, consciously directed by you, your ego can grow in a way where you can give it some leeway. Like, you can give it some leeway. You can allow your ego to go out with your friends and have a beer, even if your, let's say, higher self knows that maybe drinking alcohol is not like a genuinely good thing for you. It might not be a genuinely good thing for you, but you can accept that. You can accept that you have your ego and you can give it these experiences. Because honestly, the reason I'm so big on this is just that I feel that there is a reason we have an ego, and I don't think the reason we have an ego is only just so that we can defeat it and that we can, rise above the ego. I don't think that's the point. I think that's part of the point. That's why I'm saying you should certainly, have that experience of ego dissolvement and look to have that experience, or at least I don't even like saying looking for it because it's not something you look for, it's something you're open for, something you're open to. And many people, they really, the way you fall into awakening is exactly that. You fall into it. And once you have awakened, you need to make sure to stay awake. And that's exactly what this video really was about with these practices, right? They're about staying awake and not falling asleep and letting the ego take over full control again. And then the next level of mastery is exactly what I'm saying here, ego harmony. And I'm saying mastery here because that's how I see it. I see it as a skill. I see it as a something that you need to just consistently practice in your life. If you want to experience life in all of its facets, which in my opinion include even the egoic facets, then that is something that you need to be committed to. Like that you need to really at any moment in time be aware of. Like you need to be aware at any moment in time, and only through being aware all the time you can allow your ego to experience things that it wants to experience, like, getting money, having sex, these kind of things. They're egoic desires, but they are a part of human experience, or they can be. And because of that, I don't think these are things that need to be vilified. I think these are things that can be honored as long as they don't control your life. That's what ego harmony is about. And that's exactly why I have created a community called the Ego Harmony Society. And the main purpose of this society at this point in time is really to make that commitment. Make that commitment to yourself to stay awake and to find ego harmony. And of course, just to have a space where you can share your authentic self, like you can share your thoughts, you can share your breakthroughs, and you can let people in on you. You can let people allow you, no, you can allow people to reflect you, which is really a very, very powerful way to achieving ego harmony and to stay in this harmonious relationship. Because doing things alone, it can be very, very difficult. With that, I hope you have a blessed, blessed day.